Around 50 years ago, the world was totally different. Many parts of Europe weren't part of the global economy. China was closed off, India faced challenges, and most of Africa had just gained independence. Back then, the US and a few European countries ruled global trade and manufacturing. But guess what? Now, everything's flipped and transformed. How, you ask? The EU is really growing so fast. So, why the case? Europe's place in the global economy. Nowadays, when we talk about the economy, the European Union is like the main player in Europe. But rewind 50 years and things were way different. Back then, the European Economic Community had just 6 members with a total of about 200 million people. They were all about this bold idea of getting even closer and working together, aiming for a union. In 1966, the EEC was still figuring out this customs union thing, and there was another crew, the European Free Trade Association, EFTA, suggesting a different plan. This group, including the UK and Scandinavian countries, was more into just having free trade. Fast forward to today, and it's a whole new ballgame. EFTA is like the side character now, and the EEC has transformed into the EU with a whopping 500 million people across 28 countries. So, basically, when you talk about Europe, you're talking about the EU. One thing that's been a constant companion on this European journey is the feeling of crisis. Even back when Intereconomics started 50 years ago, they were talking about the EEC crisis. Erhard Kontensbach has concerned about the lack of coordination in economic policies. And guess what? That feeling hasn't really left us. It's like a reoccurring theme in the European integration story. GDP growth. Since 1965, the world economy has been on a steady growth journey, expanding by a bit more than 3% each year in real terms. The EU has kept up with this pace, showing similar growth rates, especially when you consider the additions through enlargements. The US has been on a similar track, with a slight slowdown in growth since 1990, but not as much as in Europe. The increase in the US population was boosted by immigration and higher fertility rates. What's interesting is that even though European countries have, on average, grown at a slightly slower pace, especially in the last 25 years, the EU has managed to keep its slice of the global GDP pie, thanks to some strategic enlargements. They're like the steady player in the world economic game. So, here's the scoop on the future of the EU economy. While it will continue to be a big player on the world economic stage, the same cannot be said for its individual member countries. By the time 2030 rolls around, there might be just one European country left among the top 7 global economies. The G7, which currently includes 4 EU member states, is in for a shakeup. It might either fade into irrelevance or go through a major makeover in its membership. In terms of pure economics, a G3 would still be a big deal, and Europe could maintain a significant role within such a group. But here's the challenge. Right now, it is the individual member countries, not the EU institutions, that represent Europe in global economic matters. To keep playing a crucial role on the international scene and protect its interests globally, EU members will need to team up, pool their resources, and let the European Commission take the lead in advocating for their interests. This isn't just about economic governance. It also has implications for the ability to flex some military muscle on the world stage. Now, let's turn the table a little bit and talk about inflation and monetary policy. Game not over yet. Beginning in the year 1999, with some EU member states, now 20 out of 27 EU states use the euro as official currency in the currency union. These EU countries from the euro area, also known as the Eurozone. The remaining 8 states continue to use their own currency with the possibility of joining the euro later. The euro is the most widely used currency in the EU. Now, the Eurozone kicked off its rate hike journey last July, with the European Central Bank bumping up interest rates 7 times since then, hitting 3.75% for main refinancing operations in May. Even though headline inflation has come down from its peak of 10.6% in October to 7% in April, there are still pockets of high inflation. The Baltic states are leading the charge with rates above 15%, driven by wage costs. Belgium and Spain are in the 3 to 4% range, while big players like France, 6.9%, Germany, 7.6%, and Italy, 8.8%, fall in between. The Eurozone's inflation story has had different chapters. First, it was pandemic-related supply chain issues, and then the Ukraine war ramped up inflation, especially in energy and commodities. Now, the big question is whether we are entering the third phase, where rising wages respond to high prices, potentially creating a wage price spiral and sticking us with persistent inflation. And guess what? Companies in Europe aren't optimistic about inflation cooling off anytime soon. According to the Deloitte European CFO survey, chief financial officers are eyeing a 6.3 inflation rate for the euro area in the next 12 months. The high inflation is also pinching companies' wallets, with 70% of CFOs finding the current cost of credit either fairly costly, 55%, or very costly, 15%. It's like a financial roller coaster, and companies are bracing for a bumpy ride ahead. Trade and globalization. Trade has been a big deal in the European project right from the start, with creating a customs union a major goal. This importance extends to both trade within Europe or within the EU and trade with the rest of the world. EU's trade with the rest of the world has become more significant, especially since the mid-1990s. It is a bit like the other side of the coin when you consider the EU's reduced weight in the global economy, as predicted by basic gravity models. Now, looking ahead, the big question is whether globalization, especially in terms of trade integration, will keep going. While past trends suggest that trade's importance will likely grow, it's not a sure thing, as argued by Gross and Al-Saidi. One factor at play is the rising importance of services, which aren't as trade-heavy as goods. Over 2/3 of global trade involves manufactured goods. For most countries, including major developed trading blocs, only about 5% of services output is traded. Compare that to manufacturing, where around 80% is traded, even though manufacturing's share of the economy is on the decline. Despite this, considering that the rest of the world is likely to grow faster than the EU, the relative importance of external trade compared to internal trade is expected to rise over time. What makes this even more interesting is that trade outside the EU involves a higher proportion of value-added trade, a crucial measure when it comes to creating jobs, than trade within the EU. Well, if you found these insights as intriguing as I did, here's a question to ponder. Will the future of global trade continue to unfold as expected? Or are we in for some surprising twists? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more captivating content. Until next time, stay curious.